Look, Islam, like any ideology, has certain defining tenets, some of which might be perfectly consistent with our values, but many of which, regrettably, are perfectly inconsistent with our values. So, take, for example, Sharia law, which is Islamic law. It purports that the severity of a punishment depends on the identity of the perpetrator and of the victim. In that sense, it couldn't be any more antithetical to American jurisprudence, which basically says that Lady Justice has to be blind. And so the people who say, hey, all religions have good and bad, I mean, in a very idiotic sense, that's true. But, Jains, people who practice Jainism, are extremely pacifist, so much so that when they walk down the street, they use a broom so that they don't inadvertently step on any ants. Regrettably, Islam is not as peaceful as Jainism, and therefore we must make sure to let in people who share our values. Several reasons, one of which is so Islamophilia, the love of Islam, stems from several, parasitic ideas. One of which is that Islam, because it is in the minority status in the West so far, it is viewed as the underdog. And of course, progressives, with their suicidal empathy, love to view the underdog as downtrodden, and therefore we need to protect it. Of course, what they don't know is that Islam is the majority. Don't know is that Islam is the majority uh, position in 56 countries that constitute the Islamic organization, the IOC, OIC, Organization of Islamic Cooperation. And so, therefore, they have this reflex, right? The noble Gazans are the sweet boys. The Israelis are the mean guys, and so that just comes from the reflexive bent of progressives to always go for the minority. The short answer, no. Of course, millions of Muslims decide to ignore the the incongruent elements of their religion. They're practicing cafeteria Islam, right? They're choosing the parts that they agree with,
But
that they don't agree with. But once Islam becomes, never mind a majority, if it becomes a strong minority, we have 1400 years of history that tells us what happens to all of the foundational values that we hold dearly in the West, right? I mean, you don't have to, believe me, you could just study history, right? I mean, almost every single one of the 56 countries that I mentioned a few minutes ago started off with having zero Islam. And then you close and open your eyes, suddenly it's 99.9% Islam. How did that happen? In some cases, it takes 5 years for it to happen. In some cases, it takes 500 years to happen. But inshallah, it will always happen. I'll mention one other thing. Many of your viewers may not know this. Since 9/11 alone, Charlie, so that's 24 years, there have been 47,000 plus terror attacks committed by Islamic terrorists in nearly 70 countries. And now there are multiple databases that you can use to prove that this number is correct. 47,000 terror attacks. So that should give you a sense of whether Islam is compatible with the West or not. Brotherhood and many other Islamic theorists and scholars and politicians have said that we will conquer the West through three means, and I hope that your listeners and viewers take note. Number one, we will conquer the West through the womb of our women, right? So that's a demographic fertility battle.
a graphic
We will
change, yeah.
produce 5 children, you will produce 1.2 children, and we will outbreed you. Number two, we will conquer the West through hijrah. Hijrah is the Arabic word for immigration, and that's exactly what we do with our open border policies. And number three, we will conquer the West by using your miserable freedoms and liberties against you. They're screaming this out from the top of the mountain, and yet most Westerners choose to ignore it, Charlie. It is, well, demography is indeed destiny, right? I mean, a culture is defined by the values that the majority of people share in that culture. Cultures are not all equal, right? Cultures that throw gays off rooftops are not as good as cultures that don't. Cultures that don't engage in female genital mutilation of their little girls are not as good as cultures that don't, and so on and so forth. So Cultures have values, religions have values. It is perfectly reasonable for a host society to say, you're only welcome here as long as you completely reject some of the values that are antithetical to ours. If yes, welcome in, my brother. If no, stay from where you came from. I mean, it's as simple as that. But again, Charlie, the reflex in the West, hence parasitic mind and suicidal empathy, people in the West have been taught that it is gauche, it is callous to ever criticize someone's religion. And that's what makes most Westerners so impotent to ever criticize Islam because they say, well, I've got my religion, they have theirs. Who am I to judge them? Well, you should judge if those values are inconsistent with those that you hold dear. So, look, all Abrahamic faiths have a coalitional psychology, us versus them, right? The Jews say they are the chosen people and they are the goys. The Christians say they are the ones who accept Jesus and are going to heaven, and the rest who are going to hell. The Muslims say that they are the believers and the kuffar, the non believers, which is kind of a derogatory term. But there is something unique in Islam in that the doctrines of Islam spend an extraordinary amount of time being very concerned about those that don't share their faith, right? So, for example, Judaism is not a proselytizing religion. That's why there are only 15 million Jews in the world. There are as many Jews today in the world as there were at the start of the Holocaust, roughly.
Totally.
Okay. Whereas Muslims, in a sense, it's the ultimate successful marketing
That's such a
strategy
good
because
point.
in 1400 years, Charlie, they have nearly 2 billion people. So Islam is successful. Judaism sucks at marketing itself. And so there are many elements within the contents of the doctrines of Islam that make it uniquely dangerous. And again, this doesn't take away from the fact that most Muslims are perfectly nice and sweet and peaceful.
Of
But
course.
where Islam goes, personal liberties die.
Well, and
Well, certainly one, by doctrinally speaking, is certainly one who is working to unify the entire globe under the unifying flag of Allah, right? So that should give shivers down the spine of most people. Look, Egypt used to be fully 100% Coptic Christian country. Fast forward many centuries, it's now 10% Coptic. Lebanon, during my lifetime, when I grew up in Lebanon, was a majority Christian country. Fast forward 45 years, it is a largely Muslim majority country. What happened to the Syrian Christians? What happened to the Iraqi Christians? What happened to the Pakistani Christians? So again, it's not as though Islam always goes into a place and decapitates everyone who's not Muslim. But by one mean or another, once Islam takes a foothold somewhere, then the trajectory is very clear. And so, if we wish to have the United States become an Islamic country, stay with the current open border policies, and in 500 years, we'll all be named Muhammad. Logic of having illegal immigrants, more money spent on them than American vets who've lost limbs fighting, defending our liberties. It's insane. I mean, hence that's the exact point of my next book, Suicidal Empathy. So yes, Rush Limbaugh is right about everything. Because Arabic is my mother tongue, I would hold conversations with all sorts of Muslim and Arabic speaking people to sort of gauge their sentiments about things. And I would repeatedly hear from Arabic speaking, Muslim speaking immigrants, in this case it was in Canada, always say that the West is a woman to be mounted. And what the reflex that captures is that all of the virtues that we think as laudable in the West, compassion, magnanimity, uh, generosity, empathy, are heard as weakness, 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 and
hmm
weakness by cultures that don't necessarily share our infinite largesse. And so it's exactly what they're
so
saying. West is weak, it's a woman, therefore
really
you
quick.
mount. Recognize that once Islam becomes ascendant, they will be decapitated just like the rest of us.